And now the conclusion of Minute by Minute here on A&E. July 18th, 1981, Kansas City, 8:05 a.m. It is 13 hours after two massive skywalks collapsed at the Hyatt Regency Hotel. The death toll will reach 114, with over 200 injured. A few blocks away at Truman Medical Center, Mark Williams, the last person removed alive from the rubble, lies in his hospital bed with severe trauma to his kidneys.
I remember my mother saying, "Doctor, is he going to live?" And the doctor said, "I don't know, I don't think so." Supposedly, I sat up on the table and said, "Like hell, I'm not going to live. I'm going to be hunting ducks on October 17th. And then I laid back down and went to sleep.
In a room down the hall, Tom Weir is suffering from a fractured leg and severe kidney damage. But his thoughts are with his wife, Jean, who was taken to another hospital across town. Then, he gets an unexpected visit.
Two police officers came into my room and said, "Don't worry, Jean's okay." And at that point, that's when I knew that everything was going to be all right.
Radio news reporter Chuck Hayes is recovering after emergency surgery on his back and shattered legs.
There was a possibility that I would not have use of my right leg. The very real possibility of amputation was there. And I begged them not to take my leg. And I prayed that I would not lose my leg.
His wife, Jane, has survived emergency surgery and is in critical condition. Because of severe damage to her internal organs, doctors list her prognosis as day-to-day. A day and a half after the collapse, the Hyatt Regency is the site of an enormous cleanup and many unanswered questions. KMBC TV reporter Michael Mahoney, who broke the story, follows the investigation.
The search for why those skywalks crashed Friday night proceeded on several fronts. Investigators, including some hired privately by the management and the ownership of the hotel, poured over the rubble. And in the meantime, the Kansas City chapter of the American Architects Institute refused to speculate on what happened, but did defend the skywalks construction. Michael Mahoney, reporting the news, City Hall.
In order to get an objective analysis of the tragedy, Mayor Richard Berkeley puts the investigation in the hands of the National Bureau of Standards, a federal agency. Edward Frang, chief of the National Bureau's Structures Division, heads the inquiry.
We will not be making any comments concerning the results of our investigation until it has been concluded.
We arrived the very day following the request from Mayor Berkeley. Our job was simply to find the most probable cause of collapse.
With the investigation underway, Mayor Berkeley turns his attention to the victims who survived the ordeal and praises the rescue effort.
Certainly the patients that I visited yesterday could not be more thankful or more appreciative or give more recognition to what was done for them, without exception.
The coordination between the police and the fire and the medical staff was excellent.
Reporters flock to hospitals all over Kansas City to hear the survivors' first-hand accounts. Jean Weir is recuperating at St. Mary's Hospital.
I couldn't see 2 inches in front of my face. All I could hear were moanings and screaming.
11-year-old Dalton Grant and his mother, Connie, convalesce on different floors.
I was in the dark so long. When I looked up at all the white and strange faces, like every new face I see, it's not like it's real.
I was in pelvic traction. I'm hanging from a sling. I just wanted to get the hell out of there, just get out of the hospital and get back to my house.
At Baptist Medical Center, Dr. Joe Wackerly is being hailed as a hero, though he wrestles with his conscience.
I had to dismember some bodies to get some other bodies, to get some live people out, and I had to let a few people die in order that others might live, who were going to die no matter what I did.
You live with that decision the rest of your life, and you wonder, could I have done more? Did I assess this patient right? I had this incredible guilt that I was becoming a quasi-hero celebrity based on terrible events that happened to other people, and I didn't want that to happen. I did my job.
7 months after the disaster, Edward Frank, chief of the Structures Division of the National Bureau of Standards, concludes the report. He finds that the collapse occurred exactly as engineer Jack Gillam suspected. The connections keeping the skywalk suspended, the box beam hanger rod connections, were poorly constructed.
All of the box beam hanger rod connections were never adequate to even come close to the requirements of the then existing Kansas City building code.
The reason for the catastrophe was one small but fatal decision. Early on in the construction, Jack Gillam's firm got a request from the steel fabricator to approve a change in the design of the hanger rod supports.
Originally, the design called for a single hanger rod that went from the second floor walkway right on up through that walkway, through the fourth floor walkway, and straight up through the ceiling. It just wasn't a practical thing.
Instead of continuous hanger rods, the steel fabricator wanted to offset them. Gillam's engineering firm okayed the change. It simply meant that prior to delivery to the construction team, steel plates, called stiffeners, would need to be inserted by the fabricator into the box beam to bear the brunt of the load. Gillam and his associates assumed the fabricators would know to build the stiffeners, but they didn't. The result, the deadliest structural engineering failure in U.S. history.
The box beam was coming down, down, down over the nut and washer, and eventually just split open, ripped through, and the whole thing came down on the atrium floor below.
After 7.5 years of litigation, the state of Missouri holds Gillam's engineering firm responsible for the Hyatt disaster and revokes his license to practice in that state.
As an engineer of record, you take the full responsibility, and that's what I did. I sealed the drawing, and that's where the buck stopped, and that's where it will on every single project.
The Hyatt Corporation and the Hallmark Corporation, whose subsidiary, Crown Center Redevelopment, oversaw construction of the hotel, would also be held responsible. They would eventually pay out over $70 million in settlements.
What is a human life worth? 114 people lost their lives. I would say they got off damn cheap.
I was angry after what I read, what I saw. There were no systems of checks and balances. That is unforgivable.
Today, most of the victims of the disaster are happy to put the ordeal behind them. Tom and Jean Weir still live in Kansas City. They now have 2 kids.
We hold no animosity, no bitterness towards any of those folks. Their lives were shattered too. They live day in and day out with the understanding that because of a mistake, terrible things happened. And I feel for them. It was a mistake. That's all it was.
Mark Williams is married with 3 kids and still enjoys hunting.
We made the opening day of duck season, just like I said I would. Running into people from the Hyatt now, typically we don't talk about injuries, we don't talk about the Hyatt, that's behind us.
Chuck and Jane Hayes both made full recoveries.
My one goal was to be able to walk into a room and not have people stare at me. A lot of physical therapy, a lot of work. But today I can do almost anything, except shoot a good game of golf.
Dalton Grant, now 31, and his mother Connie have no lingering injuries, but the memory of the Hyatt disaster still haunts him.
A couple years ago, they were doing construction at one of the malls, and one of the floors was ripped up and through the side, which looked a lot like the debris and stuff. That kind of stuff kind of gets to me.
After receiving numerous citations for supervising the triage effort, Dr. Joe Wackerly now lectures on disaster response and acts as a consultant to the government and the National Football League.
What I'm most proud of is the community of Kansas City. The external reviews and the after-action reports that evaluated what we did were very positive, and that's why it became sort of a classic disaster response to study so that the lessons learned could be applied to other disasters in the future.